Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about muscles of the upper limbs, part 1. Let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. In talking about muscles of the upper limb, the first thing we want to establish is that not truly sectioned off, but they do come in what we're going to call compartments, because that's the name of the syndrome that we're going to eventually talk about. But certainly sections, and of course you can imagine that you've got this single bone, and then the muscles are wrapped all around that in going in various directions. So it's not a true section, like there's things that divide them into quarters or halves. But if you can just imagine just mentally left and right, front and back, they are in sections, generally working together to do a particular task. And of course all muscles, as we know from studying the bones, that they are muscles that are the primary causing the action, or I should say they at one point in time they could be the primary, another time they could be the accessory, that they're holding the resistance, keeping the balance, that kind of stuff. But they are kind of in sections, so whether we section them, front and back, left and right, upper or lower, that's going to be one of the ways that we identify the muscles. But because whether it's anterior, posterior, meaning top or bottom, whether it's medial or lateral, towards the middle, left, ventral, dorsal, that kind of stuff. You'll see those terms as we have sprinkled throughout the year. But they are in sections, and that's the way we're going to kind of look at them. So again, I just mentioned these anterior, posterior, top and bottom. But when we looked at the vertebrae, we saw a lot of that. When we looked at the bones, we saw those phrases as well. But when you think about those sections, then when you think about injuries, whether it's involved in a sport, whether it's an accident that you're involved in somehow, just some sort of injury to the sections. An injury to one can create an effect for the rest of the muscles. When muscles are injured, the body does things naturally. For one, it just floods it with fluids and things to kind of help regenerate. But that in lies the problem. If the injury is severe enough to a muscle, and that area now is flooded, it's only got so much room. And so what can happen is a buildup of pressure due to the amount of fluids or other things that the body is trying to do to heal the injury. That can create pressure, and that's called Compartment Syndrome. And there at the bottom are 5, and on the next screen we talk more about it. But in general, it's a buildup of pressure due to small space, but now we're occupying that space with fluids and things like that. And that can naturally be healed, resided based on the amount of pain or the tolerance of pain a person has. Because once the muscle goes through the healing process, those fluids will be removed in some fashion, so that pressure can be reduced. But if it is severe enough, then surgery could be a part of that, and if nothing else, just an incision to release some of the fluids, to release the pressure, that type of stuff. But I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. I just wanted to do a quick general, and I ended up just started talking about it. But this is the screen that's really designed to talk about compartment syndrome. And I mentioned the increasing pressure, and that pressure is not just on the muscles. It can be against the skin. Maybe a noticeable bulge can be formed or can be visualized because of the fluids. But that also can affect nerves. Okay, it can affect blood vessels. Okay, if you're pressing against, or I should say, if you have muscle and nerve tissue and blood vessels, capillaries in those areas, and now you increase the pressure against that, you can slow down or reduce the blood flow. You can affect the nerve signals, and all that stuff is obviously, by definition, can be bad. You can see there towards kind of the bottom third of the text. If that continues for a elongated time, real repercussions can be had. But you can see that after few hours, the nerves can begin to be affected. Muscles can begin to be affected, and most of that can be regenerated or improved, once the pressure is alleviated. But there is some real danger. So when a person sustains a serious injury, to a muscle, if you think about sporting event, and football is always the easy one because there's just so much inherent injuries involved because of the nature of the sport. But taking a helmet or a shoulder pad to a thigh or to a side muscle, to the back, wherever, that's one of the things that you got to watch for if you're on the field physical trainer or one of the ambulance paramedics, or later on when follow-up. All right, and here's just a little bit more. But again, I mentioned most of this already. So, but again, compartments, injuries, blood vessels, nerves, all these can be affected. And of course, the injury itself will need to be treated. And as I mentioned, the incision to relieve the pressure, maybe an immobilization of the limb involved. That incision, fasciotomy, is what the official name there is. All right, so on more about just talk about muscles. So we start with the shoulder. We've talked about this originate or origin, but muscles of the shoulder, they obviously originate in the axial skeleton. But remember the axial skeleton from the bone talk. That's that center line, from the top of your head through the vertebrae. All that stuff is kind of connected. That internal axle refers to just the axle, or that center line, that center. If you were to draw a line separating the left and right side, that line there, all those muscles, all those bones, excuse me, that are connected, and of course everything else is appendicular, the limbs, the two girdles, and the lower limbs. But as I was saying, the shoulder muscles originate on the axial skeleton, attaching on to the clavicle and the scapula to get those moved around. And those generate lots of movement, as we're going to look at here shortly. Okay, from the shoulder, we'll look at the pectoral girdle. Remember the pectoral girdle, that's the clavicle and the scapula there, wherever you want to palpitate that. But that muscle, the pec muscles, as you know, and a lot of these, and I meant to say this earlier, well, I'd just been on the last screen, but if you are involved in athletics and you're a part of Mr. B. Shore's, Coach B. Shore's should be sure. I didn't mean be sure. Beachler. I'm sorry. Beachlers. Weightlifting classes for designed for the athletes and stuff, and others as well. Powerlifting, the group and stuff, or just people that want to improve strength. If you're a part of those classes, you'll hear these prefixes or shortened versions of these names, and or maybe you use the phrase, hey, it's lats day, it's delts day, it's pec day, we're working on our biceps, whatever. Or these names could be a part of the exercise. You'll have a little bit of a head start on knowing where these muscles are at. For example, where the pec muscles here in the chest, or the delts in the shoulder, the lats in the back, and all that stuff. But you'll see those. We'll talk about those. But the pec muscle is kind of attached to, and if you look at the diagram, left hand side towards the top, not towards the top, the very top name there, that's where that is. And it originates or connects to the third through fifth on the ribs, and of course the other main one for this is the Serratus Interior, and it kind of touches most of the ribs 1 through 9, and you can see it's the second name on the left hand side there. But those are pretty important muscles because they attach to the scapula and the clavicle, and then they are also attached to the ribs for that, and that's where they can pull. So whether you want to pull your shoulder inward or pull it back and pull it back to the resting point, raise it up, spin it around, whatever, those are muscles that are attached to kind of help get that stuff done. And to illustrate that, here's a diagram that kind of shows that moving those bones different ways, depression, the rocking of it, and of course the rotation of it, turning it, or moving it forward or backwards, those kind of stuff. Those are the you can see there the muscles that are associated with those actions. Sorry about the delay there. Instead of hitting the transition button, I clicked on the next screen, which changed my setup. So we got to fix that. So there we go. So then moving down, you can see by the diagram we're looking at the back here, and of course the traps. Maybe it's trap day, or the exercise has the word traps. That's the muscles up here in the neck, leading down into the shoulder, and then from the shoulder down into the back. So you've got the big one, you can feel that coming out of the neck, and then on down here over the shoulder bone or blade there, you can see it there. But the traps, that's the second word on the left hand side, pointing to those two spots. But those are, those help, as it says there, to stabilize the shoulder, help to move it, raising it up, not so much rotating it or whatever, but just raise it up. Okay, that's the traps that are involved in that. Okay, so continuing to look at the pectoral girdle muscles. We talked about the traps. Now we're looking for the rhomboids. Rhomboids, you'll see those. Looking at to be the right hand side, the fourth and fifth word down shows you those. But we had the traps, those big muscles. The rhomboids are the smaller ones, kind of right below that. They're a little bit deeper. The right hand side is the deep side, the left side is superficial. So what's on the left is on the surface, and it's also on the right hand side. They've just removed that top layer, so you can see the deeper ones. They're a little bit lower towards the middle of your body or cavities. But again, they have a big play in the movement of those areas. And this is just the diagram we've been looking at, again, to illustrate it. Small, the words are kind of small, but again, it's in our book. If I give you the PowerPoint's available, which it can be upon asking. Certainly put it on the classroom site. But again, what's on the left is also on the right. It's been removed, so you can see the deeper muscles. The left-hand side is more closer to the skin surface, and what's on the right is closer to the interior, where the heart and lungs will be closer to that. But again, we talked about the traps, we talked about the rhomboids, and in part 2 that we're going to get to next time, we'll talk about the delts and the glutes and the lats and that kind of stuff. But again, those are, if you're a part of those classes that I mentioned, or have just heard those phrases, people exercising, hey, it's, like I said, hey, it's last day. If you found Coach Smoot, either one, and said, hey, what day is it as far as the gym, the weight room? That's kind of the phrase they would use. I think they would. I don't really know, but those are days that, it could be bicep day, it could be last day, that kind of stuff. So that's our video over muscles of the upper limbs, part 1. When we get together next time, we'll talk about part 2. We'll see you then.